So as we continue to look at the different symbols in the Bible, today we're studying the grain and what that grain means. So when we look at the Strong's Concordance and we look at the meaning of the word, of the Hebrew word for grain, it is dagan. And what it literally means is it means wheat, cereal, grain, and corn. And of course, right away we know that a lot of that would be used for different types of bread. When we think about the Last Supper, we think about that very first communion. We know Jesus used the bread and the wine. The grain and the wine are paired together in many, many Bible verses in our Bible. One of those is one we've already looked at when we started to study the new wine 2 days ago, and that's Genesis 27:28, which says, "May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine." Later in that chapter, it says, "Isaac answered and said to Esau, 'Behold, I have made him lord over you, and all his brothers I have given to him for servants. And with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son?'" So when we really study what this means and what the grain represents, and we look at the lexicon definition and the pictograph, what we find is it's a picture of a tent door, which is a curtain hung over the entrance of a tent. So it's kind of this divider between the inside of the tent and the outside of the tent. Remember, Jesus also represents the door. It's a picture of that sustaining and that providing all our food and our water and everything that we need is being provided by the Lord. So when I started to really research the grain, one of the interesting facts I found is that humans get an average of 48% of their calories or food energy from grains. Think about that. Almost half of what your body uses as energy comes from that grain. That's why that grain is such a great representation of God providing what we need. Grains were also used to feed the livestock, to manufacture cooking oils, fuels, cosmetics, and alcohol. Almost half of the grains grown around the world are harvested for people to eat directly. Now, as you continue to look at this word and look at different Bible verses that use this word, you're going to see that over and over again, it is about God providing for the people. Now, one of the interesting things that I found as I studied this was in Hosea chapter 2, starting in verse 8 through 13, we see that sometimes God doesn't just provide. Sometimes God withholds. And this is what it says. "And she did not know that it was I who gave her the grain, the wine, and the oil, and who lavished on her silver and gold, which they used for Baal." So what they're talking about here is this person didn't recognize that God gave them the wine, gave them the oil, gave them the grain, gave them the silver and gold, and they took all that wealth, they took all of that provision, and they turned around and used it for an idol, for a false god, to worship somebody other than God and basically go against God. So what does God do in response? So then we get to verse 9. "Therefore, I will take back my grain in its time and my wine in its season. And I will take away my wool and my flax, which were to cover her nakedness." So he's like, I'm going to expose her completely. She's not going to have anything to cover her. She's not going to have the food. She's not going to have the wine to stay hydrated. "Now I will uncover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and no one shall rescue her out of my hand. And I will put an end to all her mirth, her feasts, her new moons, her Sabbath, and all her appointed feasts." He's saying, I'm going to put an end to this worshiping of other gods. "And I will lay waste her vines and her fig trees, of which she said, 'These are my wages, which my lovers have given me.' I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field shall devour them." So they're saying that even the fruit that goes to the wine is going to be gone. "And I will punish her for the feast days of the Baals, and when she burned offerings to them, and adorned herself with her ring and jewelry and went after her lovers and forgot me, declares the Lord. So when we read this passage, it's very important that it's impressed upon us that we need to be giving God the glory. We need to be giving God the glory when we have a meal in front of us because it was provided for us by God. When we have water to drink or whatever it is that we're drinking with our meal, we got to give God the glory and keep pointing it to God. Now, tomorrow, we're going to look at communion. We're going to look at why the grain and the wine are paired together so much and what Jesus said about that. Have a wonderful day. God bless, and keep walking the walk.